Vultures. One word, straightforward title. Is it about vultures? Well, sort of, but there's a bit more to it than that. I really enjoyed this poem. A lot of great imagery, well written, and about a topic that is not necessarily easy to comprehend, but something that we can all understand. And you'll see what I mean just now. In a nutshell, the poem is about how evil and goodness can exist together, and in fact it does, as opposed to separately. And what that means is that even in the best people, and I use adjective good, there is some bad, there is some evil, and even in the most evil of persons, there exists some good. And well, without sounding like you're sitting in a Catholic church, but we are all sinners due to original sin. So no matter how good or bad a person is, the speaker is, or the poet is saying, but there exists the opposite to some degree. Now, of course, you and I will know that there are some people who are more good and more evil than others. The poem is split up into 4 stanzas, and each stanza addresses something different, or takes a different stance. The first stanza is more like a scenario, it's like a narrative setting the scene, and it involves 2 vultures. So let's have a look. The first stanza: in the greyness and drizzle of one despondent dawn. Okay, so dawn, obviously the sun is rising. It is a despondent dawn. In other words, there's very little sign of it being a great day. There's not a lot of hope there. If somebody becomes despondent, it means they lose hope. Okay, and just to add to the dull atmosphere and scenario that we got going here, the speaker tells us that there is grayness. Now, if you think about it, it is drizzling, so it's overcast. The sun isn't nice, shining, reflecting on things. Colors aren't very vibrant, they're quite dull. So it's a grey, dreary atmosphere. Some alliteration there of the D sound. And then, unstirred by harbingers of sunbreak, a vulture. If we look at that grammatically, it may be a little bit ambiguous, because you think, okay, is the dawn unstirred, or is it the vulture that's unstirred? It is in fact the vulture. In other words, it is sunbreak. The sun is rising, okay? And when we have dawn, there are signs that tell us that the sun is going to rise very soon. For example, the obvious, the sky starts getting lighter. But also things like birds start tweeting. So those signs are harbingers, and a harbinger is a message of something to come. So there are signs out there that day is coming, but the vulture doesn't stir to any of it. He is unaffected by it. He doesn't care whether the sun is coming up or setting or anything. Okay, he's just chilling there. All right. And this vulture is perched high up in a tree. It is a dead tree. And the metaphor tells me that, well, it looks like broken bones, this tree. Why? Because, well, the tree doesn't have any foliage on it. There are no leaves and stuff. It's just bare branches. And it's probably all dried out and brittle. And so it probably has like a grayish kind of color to it. So it mimics that of bones. Of course, it makes sense to call it the skeleton of the tree. We sometimes refer to just the branches of as the skeleton, and we've got this whole theme going there about bones and death and stuff. So it works. And now this vulture is nestled close to his mate. So there's 2 vultures. And a vulture is not something that's very pretty, and it doesn't do very affectionate things. It eats the meat off of corpses. Okay? But despite all that, this word nestled here tells me that there is a sign of gentleness, tenderness. There's some affection to his mate. But let's continue the ugly theme here. Let's look at this vulture. Well, he has a bashed in head, because the head of a vulture is not pretty. It's got bumps on it. It's uneven. Okay, it's generally like bald and stuff. Okay, so let's call it a pebble, this head of this vulture. And there's obviously a metaphor, because, well, the vulture's head isn't really a pebble. Okay, But let's continue this description and say, okay, it's a pebble on a stem. Well, the neck is a stem, but like a plant has a stem, right? And then you'll have like the rosebud on the top. So like, okay, let's say the head is the rosebud, and then we've got the stem, which is the neck. And then look at that word, rooted in a dump of gross feathers. In other words, it looks like the stem, this neck, just is stuck into a bunch of feathers. But now that word rooted there is going nicely with the metaphor of it being a stem of a plant, and a plant has roots, and it looks like, well, maybe the body, those feathers, are the roots. Okay, so that works quite nicely. As I said, this poem's got great imagery in it. And the words dump and gross, so like what they could easily ask on this poem is diction. There's so much to talk about. You could literally quote like half the words and they mean something. They were chosen for a reason. Okay, so a dump is usually like a rubbish dump. You throw stuff unwanted there. And well, gross, well, that's pretty straightforward. So it's almost as if whoever made this bird just like threw together some feathers. Didn't make it look very nice. It's almost like they didn't want it. They just dumped it there. Okay. Let's continue. Inclined affectionately. Alright, so again we're going with nestled affectionately. Let's see if I can clear this up a little bit. No, it's about as clear as it gets. Okay, so they are leaning against each other, these two vultures, up in this tree. But let's continue with the ugly imagery. Okay, well, yesterday, you see, they picked the eyes of a swollen corpse in a waterlogged trench and ate the things in its bowel. That is pretty disgusting. That's like as bad as it gets. Okay, if we look at those words again, swollen corpse. Okay, so when an animal or a human dies, after 12, 24 hours, the body starts swelling up. Okay, but the fact that it's also in a waterlogged trench will make it swell up even more. Okay, and not only did they eat the animal or whatever it is, it's, you know, they actually ate what was inside its intestines, in its bowel. They won't hold back. They'll eat anything. Of course, the word trench there, I haven't underlined it, but you could argue, well, trench fits quite nicely with the fact that we are talking about World War II here. Okay, but a little bit more about that later. Full gorged. They didn't just like eat nice and gently. They ate so they couldn't eat anymore. Okay, and that's not a good characteristic to have. People shouldn't gorge their food. Okay, so they ate, and then they chose their roost. In other words, okay, so we've eaten. Where are we going to chill now after we've eaten? They chose their roost in this tree, this broken tree. Okay, but they found this tree. It was close enough to allow them to keep an eye on the corpse that they'd been eating from, because they don't want any other birds to come and eat from it, because when they have digested their food and they want more, they'll go back to the corpse again. It was in easy range. It wasn't too far away. They could still see the corpse. And they are using their cold telescopic eyes to keep an eye on it. If somebody is cold, it means they are heartless, they're hard. And telescopic, well, that has two meanings really. The most obvious is probably like you use a telescope to see far, so they have the ability to see far, so they could be like relatively far for us away, but they can still see the hollowed remnant quite easily. But also telescopic is not something that is very affectionate. It doesn't really go with the whole nestled and affectionate kind of theme there. It's more like robotic, isn't it? And a robot, well, that's very, how do we say, not very tender, okay, emotionless. Okay, so that's stanza 1, right? About the two vultures, this horrible image here. And I put here a disturbing image because vultures perform an ecological service and they act on instinct. They do this because, well, they don't have the ability to think morally. You know, they are born, their purpose on this planet is to be part, and a much needed part, of the ecosystem. However, man has the ability to make decisions, think, and do things that are moral or immoral based on decisions. So if humans do something that is truly evil, they have made the decision to do that, which makes it even worse. This whole scene here may be horrific, but it's nature. Whereas when man does something like we'll see just now, that is not nature, that's a decision. Stanza 2 now is like, okay, let's comment in the general sense about love, right? Strange indeed, it's very strange, says the speaker, how love, and let's personify love, right, in other ways is so particular. So usually love is very particular. And what I mean by that is, like, you can find love in stereotypical scenarios. At a wedding, when two people go on a date, them holding hands walking in the park, the honeymoon. There are areas or circumstances where people can say on the outside, oh, they love each other. There is love. But what the speaker is saying is that there are other instances where it is very unstereotypical, where we wouldn't expect it, that where we can in fact find love, even if it is not an ideal, even if it's not proud love. So let's have a look. Love will pick a corner in that charnel house, a house where they keep, or a place where they keep corpses, death, and it stinks, right? Tidy it and coil up there, perhaps even fall asleep. Now, in order to fall asleep, you have to be pretty comfortable in your surroundings, okay? So the speaker is saying that love will go into a place where you would not expect to find it. In fact, you would find the opposite, right? And it may even get so comfortable that it could fall asleep, right? But her face, because remember we've personified love now, her face is turned to the wall. It's not proud love. Love is there, but it can't bear to look at the scene that's in that room. It doesn't want to look at the horrors of all the dead bodies there. So it's there, but it's not very proud to be there. So if we think about that in a more literal kind of sense in our lives, we can say, all right, where are there circumstances where love exists, but we're not sure why or how it's there? I'll give you an example. Sometimes you find couples or two people dating, and the one treats the other one terribly, eh? And you on the outside will say, what does person A see in person B? To be treated that way, and she or he still says, oh, I love him or her. Why? That is an example of, despite the terrible circumstances or situation, love still exists there. Okay. Let's look at stanza 3. Thus, the commandant at Belsen. Now, Belsen is a concentration camp in World War II, and the commandant is the guy in charge. He spends a whole day literally burning and killing Jews, all right, in the context here. Afterwards, will go home. The fact that he has fumes of human roast clinging to his nostrils means he can still smell burnt flesh in his nose. But he will stop at the sweet shop on the way home and buy a chocolate for his child or children waiting at home for daddy's return. So we take a man here who is pretty much as evil as you can get. I mean, not only is he just like a murderer or an assassin or something, he's like mass murdering thousands of people every day. And look at this cruel diction. Human roast. A roast is usually like a leg of lamb. That's something nice. The fact that it's saying it's just a human roast, it's almost as if downplaying what he's doing, like he's just cooking, It's just like an everyday thing. Like we cook every day for ourselves, he's also just cooking. He's not killing. We don't see it that way, okay? And of course, fumes being something that won't go away. It's clinging, the smell, rebelliously. If you are rebellious, it means you go against what you should do. So the smell doesn't want to leave, even though it should, because he's not there anymore. He's on his way home. Why tell us that his nostrils are hairy? Like, what is the point of that? Well, I would say that it's to add to the ugly of the commandant, just to make him even more horrible, more evil, more unsightly, more an ogre, in order to show more clearly the contrast between evil and that little bit of good. Because that's a nice thing to do for a father, to buy chocolate for his child or children on his way home. That's nice. So it goes back here about how love and evil existing together. And then we go back to this stanza and we see, well, look here what the speaker said, how love can find itself in a horrible place. Okay, so this commandant here is the horrible person, but there's still love inside there. I put there, the tone is horrific here, isn't it? What he's doing here. Okay, look at these words, tender and daddies. Creates feeling of a loving family, gentleness, warmth. Okay, you can imagine daddy being the term that the child will use. And you can't believe that somebody who's mass killing in the day will come home in the evening and be a daddy, to a child who obviously loves his father or her father. Last stanza, praise bounteous providence, if you will. Okay, now you may read that like, what is going on? Okay, let me explain. It means be grateful, be thankful, we are lucky, whatever it is, that either it's destiny or it's fate, God, some higher power, grants even an ogre, gives even somebody who's as horrible as you can get, like an ogre, a tiny glowworm tenderness encapsulated in icy caverns of a cruel heart. So no matter how cruel this person is, he may be like an ogre, right? His heart might be cold, icy caverns of a cruel heart. You would never find goodness in that heart, right? Be thankful that there is something that makes even the most ugly person have a little bit of goodness in them, a little tiny little glowworm of light in the darkness. Okay, remember if you read Tsotsi, it was all about the light and the darkness and all that. Okay, if you will. So the speaker is saying, I would, if you would like to, rather think that. Because if you don't think that, then you must despair. Because in the very germ of that kindred love is lodged the perpetuity of evil. Because even in the greatest love, even in family love, when you think somebody's such a family man or family lady, everything is about their family, they love their family so much, whatever. Even in that love, lodged in there, like wedged in, stuck in that love, is the ever-existing evil. That little bit of evil is there, period. Okay, so let's think of that again. He's saying, or the speaker is saying, I would, if I was you, if you will, be grateful that something in this world that we cannot understand maybe makes even the ogre, the commandant here in this case, have a little bit of goodness in them, or else you're going to find that you'll never be able to enjoy true love, or no matter how good a person is, because you'll only be focusing on the fact that, yes, but there's evil in there, but there's evil. And you don't want to think that. You don't want to find your partner one day and love him or her so much, and then just be reminded constantly and just think, oh, but there's some evil in that person. You don't want to think like that, okay? We all know that everybody has things about them that, they have their faults that aren't great. Everybody has faults, and it's about accepting those faults. Yes, unfortunately, there are some people in the world that are more evil than others, okay? And some are more good than others. But everybody has that little bit of evil or negativity, or how do we say it? Terrible word. Badness, okay, to explain it nicely, in them. But we mustn't focus on that. We must rather be thankful that even in the worst people, at least there's a little bit of goodness, because that's taking more of an optimistic viewpoint. Now, the last thing here, germ. If you think about your body and you're not sick at all, right? You're functioning at 100%. Everything going well. Everything's peachy. then you get a germ, like you get a cold or flu or something, right? Your body is not at 100%. There's something attacking your body, stopping it from being perfect. Okay? Well, perfect in the use of the word, you know what I mean. So now we could say, okay, if you want to be evil, right? You want to be the most evil person there has ever been. Heaven, hopefully not. You would find it a curse that there is always some goodness in you, because that would stop you from being the most evil that you can be. However, it could be a germ in that no matter how good you are, no matter what you do, there's always going to be that little germ in you that's making you not quite 100%, not feel so great. You know what I mean? Not be 100% pure goodness. So that's what that means. Right? So let's go back to the top quickly, and we can see that there are 4 stanzas. There's a use of an ellipsis between each stanza. It's written in free verse, and there is enjambment, there's run-on lines. There's also a lack of punctuation. That's just more of an observation. I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think maybe if you did have to argue as to why there's a lack of punctuation, you could say that it's the fact that people have this goodness and this evil in them, everybody. We can't comprehend it. We can't understand it. You know, it cannot be understood logically by an earthly mind. There's something greater than us that makes that. For example, I always say, why does person A have his favorite color as red and person B has her favorite color as blue? You know, it's like everybody's exposed to the same colors growing up. So why does this person choose red and this person choose blue? You know, we can't understand it. What is it? Right. So the punctuation shows that there's a lack of structure. So we don't understand. We can't structure or put into nice little boxes how this all goes about, this contrast. Also, it could just be the flow of thoughts of the speaker. All right. And then if you want to just pause your screen, this is just an extra note that you can read about. Pause your screen and then just give it a read to help you further understand the poem. I've pretty much discussed all of this already, but the more notes you have, the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are for any question that comes your way.